So
I gotcha.
You got it. Great. Well, hello everyone. I'm Alex.
And I'm Hannah, and it's really good to be with you, even though it's all virtual. Thank you for inviting us.
Let's do 1 minute, just in case people haven't seen who we are, family, all that stuff. Do you want to start?
So obviously not from the States originally, from England. We've been in the States 13 years. We love it here. We didn't plan on staying here, but God captured our hearts with the US and the people of the US, and so we love it here. We've lived in Oklahoma City, which we had to look up on a map when we first got that job, and we lived in Ohio, and we are now in Long Beach, California, and 3 very different places, but we loved each one of them. And we really feel that by living in those different places, we have a feel for lots of the different people across the US, which we love. So and then we brought our 3 young adult sons with us. They were little when we came, but they are now 23, 21 and 18. So just graduated college, just graduated high school, and graduated, and then another one at college. So,
and they're all at home, along with a 4th boy who we kind of has lived with us, who's appeared for the last year. So Hannah says it's like living in a frat house right now, because it's very male, very testosterone-y, and smelly football cleats and movie nights and that sort of stuff going on everywhere. And food, our food budget is ginormous. So as you can imagine. So anyway,
lots of fun.
That's all good. So what we want to do each time is have 3 parts to this process. So here's the vision, really, just to kind of give you a context. We, in conversation with Roger, we want to take these weeks to give you some sort of foundational thinking and some practices to help us move further into a more missional culture. In other words, how do you as FCC step further into going with the gospel, going with the message, and not just our words but our lives, into the community, into your workplaces, neighborhoods, schools, gyms, wherever it is the Lord has you, wherever there's people you feel called to be on mission amongst. And so what we want to do over these 7 weeks is do 3 elements each time. So there's going to be heart, head, and hands. So the heart is thinking about what's the heart of a missionary. So all of us are missionaries, by the way. You're all missionaries. We're missionaries we feel particularly specific. We're a family of missionaries to the United States. But even if you were born and bred and intend to stay here to the day you die, you're still a missionary. But all of us are missionaries. So what the heart is about, looking at some of the motives from a spiritual encounter perspective. So we want to do that. There won't be a long portion each time, but we just want to have that as an element. The main chunk of our time will be on the head. So that's perhaps a more educational piece, looking in different ways. Excited to share these tonight. You're going to love it. That will be helpful. And then the 3rd piece is the hands. And we don't want to just give you information. So each time there's going to be some homework. Yes, for homework, but it's going to be practical stuff. So it's not hitting the books. It's going to be more like, here's a thing we want you to go and try doing this week. So achievable, but also with a bit of stretch in there. So hopefully that'll be a fun thing to do as well.
And then hopefully we'll have fun stories to share from time to time of, things that have happened, and maybe things that went wrong, or you thought, oh my goodness, what happened here? But that's how we learn and grow as well. We've got lots of stories to share too.
So do you want to jump into our heart?
Yes.
Thing?
So for this first week, the message of the heart that we want to give today basically is to have a deep passion for Jesus, because this is where it all stems from. We have to have that as our starting point, because if we don't start from that place of, it's our love for Jesus, it's knowing how loved we are and being secure in that identity that he gives us, then we're not going to do a very good job with sharing that with other people, whether we do it in our own strength or we do it just not understanding the Father's love. So we just want to spend a couple of minutes just on just the Father's love, and just thinking about how do we make sure that we are continually in that place of, we love you, Jesus. We know how loved we are, and we know how loved all these other people around us are too. So therefore, how can we go, and how can we bring that love to all those people around us? So it's just, I guess that's the foundational thing for all of these weeks, that everything that we do is from that starting posture of our identity and our love for him. So I just thought, let's even just take a minute now as we start. Let's just put aside all the craziness from today or whenever, and whether you want to close your eyes or whatever, just get into that posture. You might even want to take a deep breath and a big exhale, to just exhale all of the stuff that we've got. And I'm going to pray, and I'm going to have a few pauses in the prayer, just asking basically again, reveal his love to us, and just to set us up for the rest of tonight, but in terms of what we're doing as well. So thank you, Jesus, that you love us. Thank you that you have lavished your love upon us. Not you vaguely love us, you have lavished your love upon us. Thank you that before the foundation of the world, you knew us. You knew who we were going to be, that you knit us together in our mother's wombs. So Lord, we don't say anything for the next 30 seconds or whatever. I just pray that you would just lavish us wherever we are, in our living rooms or cars, wherever we are, that you would just lavish us with your love. And you would reveal more of that love afresh to us right now. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus, that you are our good, good Father. You are our perfect Father who gives us everything that we need. We say that we love you, we honor you, we praise you, we adore you. And just continue to fill us as we talk tonight, but as we go our separate ways as well. Just continue. It's not a once and for all filling. We need to keep being reminded of your love for us, and just refreshed in that place of just resting in your love. So we just say thank you, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Okay, we're going to move to do the content part in terms of the head. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you a little slideshow that we got here that will just help with this. So I'm just going to turn that on there, and then I can go back to here. So let me just share screen. There we go. So what we want to think about is the missional opportunity that we have as the people of God, so that we're in this amazing time where there's so much opportunity. And the language we're going to use is what we call Fremont.Church. And this is taken from, there's a business leadership book called Blue Ocean Strategy, which I know some of you will have read or come across. But we're going to take some of those principles and apply them to church life. So in there it has two big divisions to talk about. They talk about red ocean and blue ocean. So let's just think about those two terms. So the red ocean is where most of the activity in a particular industry or enterprise is taking place. So for us, this is where most churches are operating. And it's a competition-based approach to growth. And so what that means is you have different entities, in this case, different churches. We're all like sharks. We're all chasing a limited amount of fish that we can consume. And it's very much, I need to get, if we're to grow and to flourish, we have to do a better job than all the other churches nearby us. We have to be a better hunter, or hunter-killer in this case, to draw in people. And, obviously that applies in a business sense, where you see this very competitive approach that takes place between businesses in a particular sector, and they tend to be trying to get the same group of identified customers. And now we're not customers. I know church is different, but so I do notice that. But the principles here is still quite interesting, that many churches operate in a red ocean mindset, which is they are going after the same group of people, most of whom have already got some church experience. So they're either churched or de-churched people. And the churches themselves, in reality, end up in competition with each other. So the alternative to that is a blue ocean approach. With the blue ocean, what you do is a much more innovation approach to growth. So what you say is, okay, there's that red ocean part, but there's so much more out there, so much more potential, so many more people we could be reaching, who most churches currently aren't having any impact on at all. And so what this means is we recognize that there is actually, if you want to use demand language, there's a lot of pent-up demand in the wider community amongst your neighbors and your colleagues and your friends and family members. So people who are currently unchurched, they might openness to spiritual encounters, particularly if they can have meaningful encounters with Jesus. And what that means is we need to become people who and churches who work out how to innovate, how to have fresh, creative ways to reach these people. And in this book, what the authors talk about is, and I think this does apply to us, is that successful, in this case, they talk about businesses. For us, we talk about churches. They learn to experiment in low-cost ways. They learn to innovate and to try things and to step into fresh ways of thinking and behaving. And the reason it needs to be low cost is if it's high cost, you're not going to want to risk things. But we need to find low cost, both, and I don't just mean monetarily either, so that we can try and innovate and think, well, what could reach these people? What might work in this part of town? How might we reach this, the local elementary school? Or how do we reach the Facebook campus? Or how do we reach this residential retirement community? Or what about the 20-year-old kids who play basketball downtown? Or what about the small business owners? Or whatever your heart or your passion is, we need to find ways and models and tools to help to help all of us experiment and to innovate into these things. A couple of other things that's worth noting as we think about the red ocean, blue ocean, and how it's taught. With the red ocean mindset, the view is that that particular industry's structure and boundaries are fixed. In other words, it's quite a rigid model of how you do this particular task, how you offer this thing that you're selling, as it were. And in the same way, what you find with a lot of churches and a lot of Christians is that we have a very rigid mentality of this is what church must look like. This is the format we have. This is like the formula. And most churches are doing very much the similar thing. There's little nuances, like how loud the music is or whatever, but there's actually not that much variance when you look around stuff. And so really that's why if you have that view, then that's what drives us. If we want to grow, we basically have to do a better job, quote unquote, better job than other churches around us so that we stand out in some way from the crowd. That's red ocean. In a blue ocean mindset, what they recognize is that there is a recognition that our industry, in this case churches, structure and boundaries are not set in stone, so they can be reframed. So what that looks like for us is we can find ways where we're absolutely locked onto the gospel. We don't water down what we believe. We don't compromise the core essence of our message in any way whatsoever. But at the same time, we also identify what are the cultural forms or what are the preferences that we carry, some of which are great and they're not sinful, and some of which we're going to keep. But we also recognize that in order to go with the gospel, some of those things might need to morph, they might need to be reshaped. And so we're willing to think a little more creatively about what are the boundaries of FCC in terms of who's in and who's out, who's part of your church community. We start to explore interesting questions around that. So that's that kind of red ocean, blue ocean concept. One other thing I want to feed in before we get into some more content. Here's a figure for you. 40%. And do you want me to do this? Or should I do this? All right. So this is from a Gallup poll. And Gallup estimate that so they think 40% of the population in the United States goes to church weekly. However, I actually want to suggest that's a flawed figure. There's a lot of other research that's taken place around it, which suggests that actually it's less than half that amount. So they reckon in the US, this is 2018, so two years ago, on any given Sunday, about 17% of the country will go to a church service. And what that means is the way today statisticians are measuring committed. So they say a committed churchgoer is someone who goes 3 Sundays out of 8, and they reckon that's about 1/4 of the whole population. And don't forget, that's across the whole country. So where you are in the Bay Area, as you know better than I would, the demographics are going to be lower than that. So your percentages are going to be considerably lower than that. But this is the national level. So we have this situation where the red ocean is getting smaller. Most churches are fighting over that 40% who have some connection with a church. Even if, say, we said, let's just pretend these figures I've got here in black are accurate for where you are in Fremont. And let's add to that the people who just come very occasionally. Maybe they appear at Christmas. Maybe they're on the very edges of your church's impact in this city. Maybe they've had some connection with the preschool or something like that. And maybe that takes us up to 40% at an absolute squeeze and a push if we, downhill with the wind behind us and we're slightly squinting. But nevertheless, that still leaves the vast majority of the community around us and around where you are completely unchurched. And most churches have very little effective engagement with that 60%. That's why they are the blue ocean. And so there's massive, massive opportunity in that in that context. Now, obviously, if you look at that 60%, there's going to be a range of responses. There's going to be some who would tell you they're, militant atheists. A lot of atheists I talk to actually aren't atheists. They haven't really thought that deeply. But anyway, but nevertheless, it's going to be a range. And there's going to be some who are actually really quite open to Jesus, and that they're very open to spiritual things. And if something meaningful happened, that they'd be wide open to that. But there's going to be a range within that. But there is this opportunity for us. And what this looks like is we have to start thinking a little more creatively. Now, some of you are going to be thinking, does this mean we dump Sundays? No, not at all. We keep doing the great stuff that happens at weekends, the existing forms. So this is very much a both and approach. But I think it's a recognition that if we put all our eggs into the existing mode of saying everyone has to come to us, everyone has to come to our building at a time and place of our choosing. They have to dress kind of how we would dress. They have to fit into our cultural mores. They need to fit in with just how we would all operate as a group in that church service. There's a decreasing number of people for whom that's going to be a great entry point. So whilst there are some, and we keep doing that, and we'll hear over the weeks why we think there's a lot of validity to doing weekend service still. But if we are deluding ourselves if we think we're going to reach the community if we make that our primary mode. So we have to find, alongside doing great Sunday services and the things around all that, we have to find ways where we can empower people to go with the gospel and start to make a difference, or increase, I'm not saying you haven't done this before, but increasingly be effective on mission so we can reach the 60%, which, as we've noted, might well be 70 or even 80% where you guys are. Because there is this blue ocean of possibilities if we will embrace the right mindset. So with that in mind, what we want to do is walk you through a chart which we've put together, which shows some of the differences between these different ways of thinking and behaving. And so, yeah, we'll walk through these. This will help illustrate the difference between a red ocean church and a blue ocean church. And then what we'll do is we'll have conversation and interaction around it. So if we say something that throws up a question, or you think this is heresy, or you disagree, or you love it, just make a note, and we will come back and have a whole bunch of time to process together. So what we'll do is we'll compare red ocean and blue ocean, and we're going to do different categories each time. So I think there's 8 categories we're going to share with you. So number 1 category here. So in the red ocean or blue ocean church, what is the focus? In other words, if you're going to say it in one word or one idea, what is it? What is that type of church focused on? So in a red ocean church, it's very much event focused. In other words, I've put Sundays there in quotes. And again, we're not, just to be clear again, we are not saying don't do Sunday services. All right. So we're not saying that. However, a red ocean church makes the pinnacle of the spiritual week the Sunday service. In fact, the very mountaintop on that, the highest point on that pinnacle of the mountaintop is probably when the lead pastor steps into the pulpit to preach. That's like, you can get no higher spiritual moment in a red ocean church. And we're not against preaching. Preaching is awesome, all right? But but it's the wrong thing to make your primary focus, all right? The focus in a blue ocean church is process rather than event. And what we mean by that is the process we're working on is go and make disciples. In order to make disciples, it's not going to be primarily about an event. It's going to be about a journey. It's going to be about walking with people. It's going to be about, it's life on life. It's house on house. It's you with that, building a relationship with the person who's got the next door cubicle to you, or the family next door to you, or the guys you play sport with, or whatever it is. And it's a journey, it's a process. And a blue ocean church recognizes that and says, we want to help you on that journey. Now, that might include Sunday services, great, but we're not making that the pinnacle of what we're about. So that's the focus. The next one is, element is strategy. Do you want me to do this?
Do you want me to do it?
Yeah.
So basically, the strategy in the red ocean, that is the one that most Christians default to, is we say, come to us. So you have to come, you come to the Sunday service, you come to whatever it is that we're putting on, almost certainly on our church premises. And what you do in that situation is that you extract the people from the community, you extract them out into where you are. Whereas the blue ocean approach is basically, we say, we will equip you to go. So instead of extracting people from the community, this is much more incarnational. So we are doing incarnational mission. So like Jesus, incarnated the gospel, he left heaven and came to us. We are saying we will incarnate the gospel where we go. So whether it is, the gym or the neighborhood or the school, wherever it is. So basically, if people want to come to us, fine, but let's at the same time equip people to go, to take the gospel wherever they find themselves.
Okay, next one.
Okay, the next one is basically a view of discipleship. So how do we make disciples? So traditionally, in a red ocean approach, it is information transfer. So basically, we've got lots of information, whether it's books, whether it's sermons, whether it's Bible studies, and we're not saying they are bad at all. They're great. But we can't just make disciples in that way. What we see Jesus doing a lot of the time is he asks his disciples to imitate him and to be apprentices. So we say imitation and apprenticeship. So basically, Paul says, imitate me as I imitate Jesus. And we should be saying the same as we go into that blue ocean, imitate me as I imitate Jesus. And it doesn't mean that we have to be perfect. You get a bit worried then, you think, oh my goodness, my life's not worth imitating. But let's recognize that in our weaknesses, in our failures, hopefully there is still something there that is worth imitating, and we are all learning together from Jesus.
The next heading is success. So what is success? And success is not a bad word. Clearly, you want to have a sense of, how are we going to know we're winning? So how do you look back as a church and go, yeah, that's been a good year. The Lord's been at work. In a Red Ocean church, success is listed as the ABCs. So that's attendance, buildings, and cash. And most churches, those are the primary things that they measure and they count. And it's built around attendance primarily at the Sunday services or Sunday service. And again, those aren't bad things to do. We have to count the money in order to bank it. It's fine to measure how many turn up on a Sunday, but I think if we make those our primary measures of success or primary measures of health, we're missing out on something deeper. So what we would suggest instead, a better overall measure of success in a church is how many people do we have in disciple-making relationships? So how many people is there some degree of intentional process and journey where we're helping them walk towards Jesus? Now, what's interesting about this is it starts to change our measure of who is in the church and who isn't. So, for instance, to give an example, you might have someone who's does a great job with teenagers who've got no church background at all, and they might have a thing that happens. I'll just say at a basketball court on a Tuesday night, and they bring pizza in and they play ball, but also they get the kids around and they start to read the Bible a bit with them, and they start to help them think, well, how do I deal with parents, and what about school, and they're coaching them in life, and they're bringing the values of the gospel in, and they get to perhaps read from scripture with some of them. And what they're doing is that they're discipling these young people towards Christ. But it might well be that for a long time, none of them ever show up on a Sunday morning at your service, because for them, maybe those kids don't ever get out of bed on a Sunday morning. Or maybe just culturally, it's completely different. They want to hear hip hop music if they're going to go to a church, and etc. And it's not a right or wrong thing, but it's just a recognition that if we make the measure of success for that detached student worker, you've got to get those kids into the service, or you've got to get them tithing, or whatever it is. It's really going to frustrate that work. So I think there's a recognition that we need to be going after measurements that more accurately reflect a disciple-making approach if we're going to be on mission. Okay, next one. What's the social contract? What's the social contract? This is really interesting. So any organization that you're a part of, there is an implicit social contract that people enter into. And you will recognize this in your workplace, or if you're part of a club or an organization, it's there. So in a Red Ocean church, the social contract is, let me just get it up here. It's basically this. What we as the church say to people is, come to our thing, behave, so don't shout out during the sermon, all that sort of stuff. Give us a bit of money, maybe serve a bit, so give a bit of time and money. And in return, we will provide you with religious goods and services. We'll stay nice. We'll do some nice religious stuff with your kids for an hour a week, and you'll get this kind of nice package. And that's the deal. That's what we're offering people. That's the social contract. In a Blue Ocean church, the social contract is this. If you're part of this church community, we are going to focus on equipping you to go. So that's the thing. And what we'll do is we will empower you and hold you accountable. So I said that slightly incorrectly. So what we're saying is, as an individual, what you do is you come and you are wanting to be equipped to go. And the church as a kind of body empowers you. So it's super releasing, super empowering, but also it's very accountable. We're going to come back to that topic later on. So that's what the social contract is. And it's a very different sort of dynamic that's going on there. Let's think about leadership.
So with the Red Ocean leadership, the word we've got here is clericalism. So basically, we're saying that the church leader is the one with all the wisdom, all the knowledge. They need to be the one who is telling people what to do, and whether it's high church or low church, that they are the ones with the power and who should be doing this. Whereas with
obviously, if it's Roger, you would listen to everything he says and do everything
absolutely
he says. Quite right. But normal, so.
But with the blue ocean, and when we're not anti-leadership, we believe in leaders, we need leaders.
Yeah.
But with blue ocean, we're basically saying it's the priesthood of all believers. So basically, we've all been called, and Jesus tells all of the disciples to go and preach the gospel. It's not just if you are gifted, or if you are anointed, or if you are full-time in ministry, but it's all of you. Go preach the gospel, heal the sick, raise the dead. So we are all sons of God, and we are all priests and heirs, and so we can all go. And the job of the leadership is to equip and help and resource everyone to go and be in the hands and feet of Jesus.
Next category is, what's the outcome? So if you're in a red ocean church, what's the typical outcome? And in a blue ocean church, what's the typical outcome?
You do this one.
All right, okay. So in a red ocean church, the typical outcome is Christian consumers. So consumerism is so deeply embedded in our culture that it's infected the Western church in profound ways. And so many churches actually have unwittingly created Christian consumers. So these are people who are saved. So I'm not saying, it's people aren't getting saved, but there's a phrase a friend of mine used, which he says, what you win them with is what you keep them with. And if the way you win people is saying, hey, come to our thing, we're super cool, we're the best show in town, we got the sexiest preacher, our music's the best, we do the best events, we have the best kids program, look how clean our bathrooms are, we got lovely parking for you. And none of those are bad things. But if that's all it's about, then what you create is you've basically created a consumer culture, which is where people expect, I come and give you my time and I behave and I give you a bit of money or something, and I expect to get this stuff back. So it's highly transactional. And so what you don't create is mature believers. You get people who are saved, but they're not actually making a lot of impact for the kingdom. Whereas in a blue ocean church, if it really goes well, what you would end up with is a city transforming movement. In other words, if you're equipping people to be empowered to go and to make disciples, where they live, work, and play. If you are what you'll see is a church that starts to have massive impact upon the city where you are. You create a movement by empowering people and releasing, by decentralizing decision making as much as possible, by helping people feel that they really are encouraged and equipped. And it's great if they go and innovate and they try stuff and they're trying to extend the kingdom, and you're in this really supportive, loving environment of the church where you can get support, you can be cared for when you need it, you've got champions, you've got arms around the shoulder, there's people who, they rejoice and when you need rejoicing, mourn when you need mourning. You get all that resource, but it's focused on to how do we change the world around us. So you get this city transforming mission.
And the last thing we've put some words down, because we said, what does it feel like? So if you're in a red ocean church, it will feel things like safe or controlled or predictable or well planned, or maybe slightly dull. Oh, you've got these wrong words anyway. Slightly dull, low risk, and maybe segmented from the rest of life. So, some of those there's nothing wrong with, but maybe those, it depends on your personalities as well as to which you're going to default to more, whether you're going to be more attracted to red ocean or blue ocean. But it's good to have different options because different things appeal to different people. So blue ocean churches are going to be much more adventurous. They're going to be permission giving, yes, go try this, go have a go at this. They're going to be way more room to innovate and try new things. But they're also going to be messy. So mistakes are going to happen and things are going to happen. You think, oh my goodness, how do we work through this problem? Or So mess is going to happen. It's going to be fun / scary, depending which way you look at it. It's going to be high risk, because sometimes things will go wrong, or somebody will complain, or maybe something is a bit too daring. So high risk, but then it can be much more integrated with the rest of life. So in some ways you can do church, you can be a Christian wherever you are working, resting, or playing.
Okay.
So that's that chart.
I think we'll pause there. I'll drop out of that. Okay, I'm going to give you 20 seconds. Just think, or if you're with someone, you can talk to them, but just think, what stood out to you out of that? Is there a particular concept you agree or disagree? Maybe there's something you're confused on. Maybe you wrote a question down as you were doing it. Just give you 20 seconds just to bring that to mind. And then when you're ready, we'd love to just unmute and say hello and fire away.
Well, this is Melissa.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi. So I'm really excited to hear this. This to me sounds great, because I know there are so many people out there that have faith in different ways than what I may have. But that doesn't mean that they're not interested in Jesus. And it doesn't mean that we can't have that kind of relationship when we come up with them and talk to them. And so, you know, God has put me in the position of working in a hospital, and it's really quite interesting to see what has been happening lately with me, and especially with all the COVID stuff going on. So I'm very excited.
Yeah, we've got 3 people we have a large missional community. And so we've got 3 folks in there who are all in hospital work. So yeah, they've been telling some amazing stories of, you know, there's real openness right now. Or you don't need me to tell you that. So yeah. Thank you. Thank you for being the first to speak as well. Well done.
Okay, well, this is Sue Rudholm, and I'm going to comment. A lot of you who have been at FCC will remember that, I don't know, 12 years or so ago, I think it was Pastor Kevin who presented Blue Ocean, but he didn't talk about Red Ocean, so I never really understood. You know, someone just said, oh, this is a business approach or something, and I just didn't get it because it wasn't explained. So that's all I'm going to say.
But it was helpful.
Was it helpful this time?
Yes, because it makes, it's like, well, blue ocean, of course the ocean's blue, you know, and I didn't quite, understand it. And then with the red, with the sparks and the blood, okay, then there's a contrast, and then there's it made more sense. Okay.
Okay, good. Thank you.
This is Gary.
Hi, Gary.
How you doing, Alex?
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. We're kind of here in our living room. You know, I think this is great because I think God has brought these concepts to us over these past years with Pastor Kevin and Dave. But, I think it was the seeds were planted, but they never really took growth yet. And I think now we're just in the next phase of executing it, of actually being guided to help this to happen. So I think the mindset has been planted in our congregation. And now I think we are much more ready than we were a few years ago when this was being first presented to us. So I appreciate your coming on board in this coaching aspect of it, because I think that's part of helping us be equipped.
Thank you. That's really great. Gracious. Thank you.
Hi, this is Jessica. And I was taking notes, and the part I put an exclamation point was a city transforming movement. Because I know our church has had that vision of transforming the city in the past, and I'm excited to get back on that vision and mission.
Yeah.
And I think all of this is so great. So thank you so much.
Let me ask you a question. What for you would be, obviously city transforming movement's a big, that's a huge
Right.
one. So is there something within that, a segment that for you makes your heart sing? Is there something, if I asked you to be, and there's no wrong answer, but is there something for you that you go, oh, I'd love to see this happen?
In our, like, what I'd love to see in our city?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think people having peace of mind, being kind to each other, you know, you think of the fruit of the Spirit and people actually having that in their lives rather than, you know, cutting people off or, I don't know, fighting with each other, you know, just having whole marriages, whole families, staying together, healing in people's hearts, Christ identity, all of it.
Love it. Yeah. Gosh, we need those things, don't we, so much?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Okay, who disagreed with something? Who said, well, you know, I get your point, but that's not how I would have put it. You flaky English people. Come on, have a go. You're not going to upset us because all the bad bits were done by Hannah, by me. So
we're very hard to offend.
Yeah, you're not going to offend us. Or even it didn't make sense. So, you know, and that's fine as well.
This is Gary again. Nothing you said offended me, so I think that was great. But the context of when we are doing this, with what's been happening with COVID and the racial tensions and the things that are happening in our society, presents an interesting environment to start this missional focus, because the focus in our society has been on social justice and things like that. And how are we as a church going to respond in a way that doesn't look like we're just conforming to what's happening around us, but how can we differentiate our response and yet still stand up for social justice, still stand up for righteousness, and stand up in a way that Jesus would, and not just because whatever movement is popular at the moment is in the news.
Yes. Yes. So there's a way that we sometimes when we're with you in person, we'll do this at some point, but I'll just give you the super brief version of it. So often when we're starting to work with a church or an organization or community, we'll draw a Venn diagram. So, you know, the three overlapping circles, and we'll label them. So these for us feel like the three big things that we feel called to do. So one of those is disciple making. So we're called to be people who are making disciples for Jesus. Clearly, you know, if you said to any church, what are you meant to be about? Eventually they'll either fast or slow, hopefully they get to something about disciple making, because it's pretty clear in the scriptures. The second circle is being on mission. So how do we go with the gospel and make and reach people who are currently are far from Christ? And then the third element, third circle, the label we'd give that is being naturally supernatural. So naturally supernatural. In other words, we believe it's really important to be empowered by the Holy Spirit. I think what can happen is, from what I know of you guys, super capable people that I mean, Roger and others have been telling us about, you know, amazing church, great heritage, some incredibly gifted people. So there's lots and lots and lots of strengths of that. The potential weakness is that you're so capable, and I include us in this. I'm not saying you, I'm saying we, you know, we're well educated as well. When you come from the sort of worldview that we all come from, we could end up organizing things out of our competence, out of our giftedness, and we wouldn't quite notice if the Holy Spirit didn't show up. Does that make sense? So I think there's always that danger. So I think, so for instance, to address, some of the things you just mentioned there, we do have wise things to say about, say, how the races can interact together, that there's genuine issues to be addressed there. And some of you will have particular callings to speak into that. Some of you will have platforms to speak into that. And that's all good. So that's great. Wisdom is a gift of the Spirit. And so some of us will be given words of wisdom in particular situations, to speak those words of truth, words of life. And all of us are called to, to unity and to love our neighbors, all that stuff. But I think it's more than that as well. So I think our response looks just the same as the secular world. We've missed a piece. So part of our response to this is recognizing there's a spiritual dynamic to this as well. And so it's not negating those first things, but as well as that, what does it look like for us to be people of prayer at this time? Or what does it look like for us to be saying, we recognize, Paul talks about spiritual powers and authorities or principalities that, that they come from that dark place. And one thing they'll seek to do is cause division. They'll seek to, because their task is to tear down what the kingdom of God looks like. And Revelation tells us very clearly that what we long for in heaven, it's going to be a place where it's all that, all peoples from every nation and tribe and tongue and skin color and everything else. We're going to be joined together in this beautiful assembly, not all watered down, but actually having total unity in our diversity. And there's a beautiful picture. The Bible paints that better than anything else I've ever read. And that's something the enemy is fighting against. So part of this battle is a spiritual battle. And so I'm going to stop preaching. Sorry, I'll stop. But there's aspects to this which I think sometimes we as the people of God feel either we forget or we just feel coy about, because that's perhaps not language that is used in the wider conversation. And I'm not saying we have to broadcast everything to everyone, but that there's an aspect to this which we need to pick up on as well. Does that make sense? So that's why we would put those three elements together. And when they all intersect, that's where you get this kingdom culture where they feed off the strengths of each other. But when we're with you sometime, we'll talk you through that, because there's loads of elements about that. It becomes a really helpful diagnostic tool. So anyway, that was a long, rambly response to your very good point.
This is Sally.
Hi, Sally.
Hi. Well, I was just really interested to see the traditional church setting that I have spent 70 or so years in, and recognize the truth of the points that were made about what that church looks like. And when you do see the truth of it, such as it being, safe, controlled, predictable, all of those things, then you do recognize that it needs to be more than that. So I am grateful. Even at my age, I don't think I have had a good idea of discipleship, a real helpful idea of how that is. So I'm glad for this, the other side of this too, that we're speaking of. Roger Sunday morning really got this started in my mind with speaking of faith as something that dreams big, it's simple, it's thankful, and it's livable. And it really, that started me thinking of how doable it is. I don't have to have gone to a theological school. I read the Bible every day, and I learn a lot from it, of course. But, we put ourselves down thinking that we aren't the pastor, we aren't the knowledgeable ones that have something to offer. But I do think that the simplicity of what was said Sunday really ties in and makes sense with what you are speaking to us about tonight in the Blue Church.
Thank you, Sally. That's really kind. Very gracious of you.
And you're my new favorite person for remembering the points from the sermon.
Well, I did. Oh, and I gave Roger credit for it. I'm sorry. Take that back. Anyway, I did jot them down, I have to confess, but I jotted them down because they really, it was so simple. I really was grateful for that.
Thank you.
Hannah, I loved how you talked about what red ocean and blue ocean feels like.
Mm.
And you talked about, I love the words about adventurous, messy, scary, high risk. Give us an example. If something were to pop for either one of you, an example that looked like it was going to be something that was going to be so messy and so crazy, but then God worked something delightful and wonderful out of that mess.
Yeah. Can I go first?
Does anything in terms of all the things, particular thing come to mind?
All right, I'll go first. I'll tell you a story. So we spent 5 years in Ohio, northeast Ohio, near south of Cleveland, so that was a very interesting situation. That was a mega church that had grown very large, with an introverted evangelist leading it. Very interesting, different conversation. But the conversation at the beginning when they brought us on was, they literally said, we are a mile wide but an inch deep. And so part of what they wanted us to help them do was to build an intentional disciple-making culture and to go in mission. So continuing the story, the Lord was so gracious, and we were able to see loads of missional communities, so mid-sized missional communities focused on reaching specific neighborhoods or networks of relationships. The average 29 people in size is actually that, because we counted. Anyway, there was one community that met together, and someone in the group invited some friends of theirs who were a lesbian couple and who were unchurched, but they'd been having conversations over the fence like you do, and they were like they were actually quite open to the Lord, and so they said, well, do you want to come to our group? It's really cool. And these two ladies had adopted two children. One was like 10 years old, one was 3 or 4, and they were they'd just finished the process of going through artificial insemination for one of them, and she'd just given birth. They had a baby, so one of them had a baby, and it was like from them as a couple. So these scenarios, which are increasingly common in our world today. And so anyway, they started going to this missional community. They were really loved well. They started to hear about Jesus. The group was so gracious and just gave them room to, they accepted them for who they were, but also the truths of Jesus were there as well. The gospel was shared, obviously. And along the way, these two women decided they wanted to commit to Christ. And so they start to walk that out in their missional community. And what actually happened was, one of the trigger points was their 10-year-old came back from school one day, and she sat one of them down and said, "Mummy, what's a lesbian?" And the woman says, "Well, where do you hear that?" She said, "Well, at school, someone said that you and other mummy, you're lesbians." And this woman said to her daughter, she said, well, she gave a simple explanation, age appropriate, but she said, but you know what? We've been going to this missional community, to the group. She gave it the name. And the daughter said, yes. She said, well, we've been learning about Jesus, and actually we feel that Jesus is saying we're not meant to live like that. So, and actually what it turned out they decided to do is they were going to stay together as a family unit, but they were going to live it was going to be a non-sexual relationship. So the Spirit is discipling them. There's all sorts of interesting stuff going on, and then out of that, they decided they want to have the group was talking about baby dedications. We used to do them in Sunday services at, 3 or 4 times a year. And they said, we'd like to get our baby dedicated. Can we do that? Would that be allowed? And so the leaders of the group came to me and they told me, this is where I hear the story. And I'm like, that's awesome. What a great story. Of course we'll dedicate their baby. I mean, they're on the journey of discipleship and the Lord's at work. So I brought it to our senior team. And of course, people were going, what? This is going to be interesting. So there's a few alarm bells went off, but we did it. And, but the way we did it was we'd get the households up at the front of the service. So it's, big church, big room. And you'd have like mummy, daddy, baby, mummy, daddy, some other kids, baby, mummy, daddy, kids. And it was going to be that, and it would be mummy, baby. And so what do we do about that? They said to me. And I said, well, so my brainwave was, what we do is we say, well, why don't we invite, if you're a particular friend of this household, why don't you come and stand with them when they do their dedication bit? So that worked, except for no one came and stood with these two for whatever reason. The message didn't get across. So it was even more transparent. So anyway, we go through the thing and it's wonderful. But then after the service, 2 couples who've been part of the church for a long time, and they were probably in their 30s. They were in the 30s. So not old people or anything like that. You wouldn't think would be necessary, on the outside, you wouldn't think would be super offended. They were furious. Like they were so angry with us. And they came to me and said, what are you doing? Why do you allow them, that couple to do this? And I said, well, look, there's a whole backstory here, which obviously we didn't tell on the Sunday because we're not exposing people like that. We're not, it's a baby dedication. And we weren't asking other people to expose their sins, to the community as well. And they said, their response basically was, that's totally wrong. What you should have said to them was, we're not dedicating your baby until you two have separated, you've each gone and found a husband and you've got married to him, and then we'll dedicate your baby. And so obviously we disagreed at that point. And I share that story with you. And you might disagree maybe with some of what we did, but the reality is, as we go further out into the blue ocean on mission, the stories and the contexts we're going to impact are going to be more and more messy. And there's going to be beautiful stories of transformation. And those women are still part of the church, and they're really going, because I know the guys who lead the group, I asked about them about a year ago, and they're going great guns with the Lord, and God's done an amazing thing in that family. But of course, where they started from is going to some extent dictate the journey that they take. And there's going to be some situations where it's just going to be a bit of there isn't a solution, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? So, there's going to be some muddiness in how you work it out. And I'm not saying that to you as a diktat, you must handle all your situations like that the same. There's going to be some of that stuff, there's going to be some, and I'm sure you've already experienced some of that, but I think the further we go into the mission field, the more we encounter people who are not just, they stopped going to church 20 years ago. You're going to encounter people who they've never been, and their parents have never been, and their parents' parents perhaps have never been to church. I mean, they're completely unchurched. And the value systems that are going to be shaping those folks is going to take a lot of unpicking and a lot of work, which isn't our job, it's the work of the Spirit, of course, but we get engaged with that. So I think that's what we mean by the messiness. It's joyous, and it's amazing to see God do that stuff, and Jesus reaches people. I would argue, I think that's in line with a lot of how Jesus did his ministry as well. But there's going to be some discomfort in some of those scenarios as well.
Got a couple more stories for you, which aren't quite as messy as that. They're calmer, but even so. So when we were in Oklahoma City, we did a missional community in our neighborhood with our neighbors. And lots of our neighbors came. They were really up for it, really favorable. And
almost all of whom were unchurched.
Yeah. I think there was 2 other Christian couples, but everybody else was unchurched. I think they'd all grown up in the church, but they'd all got disillusioned. Anyway, there's this higher fertility doctor who comes, and I remember having some conversation about, I can't remember what it was about, but I remember her dropping the comment of, oh, there's lots of ways to God or something. And of course, everything in you wants to say, no, Jesus is the only way. And so we didn't correct her, because I think you don't want to jump down people's throats. You want to give grace that we're not condoning what she's saying. It's getting that balance. So that's again where you get the messiness. People are going to say weird and flaky stuff which isn't quite right, and you can't correct them straight away. It's about walking that journey together. And I can't remember, somebody else in the group said something, but that was early on in the relationship, and we continued in that relationship. We continued meeting together, and she I don't know whether she fully gave her life to Jesus, but she got so much close to Jesus, you know, and her theology was not totally worked out, but slowly worked out in the course of that relationship, which was, again, beautiful to see. And one other story, when we were in Ohio again, and we had the job of setting up all the missional communities, and so we had a Sunday where we said, okay, this is the vision, this is what we're aiming for. Okay, if you've got any ideas, come tell us your ideas. And we had this couple, or this woman, come to us, and she said, I've got all this old jewellery, all these old beads and stuff. And she said, I'd love to start a group with making jewellery out of these beads. And I mean, Alex just looked at her and thought, that's never going to work, ever going to work.
And she was like, definitely not the person you picked from the lineup to lead.
She was not
anything.
A natural leader. No. She was very much in the background of the church. But she just said, I've got this idea, I want to do it. So in the trial and error mode, and sure, we'll release you, have a go, great, go for it. And actually it ended up being a really great group, and they attracted mostly mums with teenage daughters who love doing crafty stuff together, and then they do a little Bible study or say some prayers while they were doing this. And what they would do is they'd make little bracelets for disadvantaged children or women in jail or stuff like that. And I think as they were making the bracelets, they'd pray for the people who were going to receive these bracelets. So it ended up being one of those surprise things which we thought would never work, but totally did, and blessed the makers, the people in the group, but also the people they were ministering to.
And most of the people in that group were not believers when they started. So, I mean, and I would, if it'd all been down to me sitting in my study, as it were, coming up with the ideas for the groups, I would never in a year of Sundays thought of that one, you know. So that's the empowering thing. And, you know, it's creating a culture. The temptation, all of you are leaders. You lead it in church or in the workplace or in the community. When someone comes to you with an idea and you kind of go, oh, the temptation can be to say no, but. And I think the discipline in a missional culture is to say yes and. I mean, unless it's unbiblical or unethical, you know, clearly that. But beyond that, we need to be able to say yes and. How can we help you? How can we help you develop that? And it's recognizing that. Do you remember Malcolm Gladwell? Many of you, I'm sure, would have read. I think it's in Tipping Point. He talks about the 10,000 hour rule. Do you remember that? The 10,000 hour rule. You know, like if you're going to be a concert pianist, you've got to practice 10,000 hours. And there's obviously great insight in there. I heard someone do a tweak on it. They talked about the 10,000 experiment rule. And what they were arguing was that in a more innovative culture, you want to see just tons of little experiments going on. They're not all like launch a spaceship, but there can be lots of little iterations and ideas, and
Didn't
you try
Edison
things.
have that in one of his factories or something, where they said they wanted to do lots of experiments, come up with a minor invention once every couple of weeks or something?
I think it was a minor invention once every 10 days. Yeah. And a major one every
6 months.
Yeah. So it's almost like, if you're going to translate that, what does it look like for FCC to have an R&D department, research and development department? What would that look like? Could you cope with that, with the times when they blow the room up?
I think one of the things that you have to do is that, and I'd love for the two of you to do it tonight, give us permission to not always get it right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh,
Yes.
totally.
And to know that, you know, that's the beauty. You can come up with all these ideas. Well, let me try this and let me try this. So, for example, so when I was in Ohio, I set up this group for women. There were lots of women who were home and mostly housewives. And so I set up this group called Desperate Housewives. And it was just when that show was really popular. And it was very invitational to also, you know, to any woman who inside the church, not in the church, to come and just be part of it. And we did all sorts of different things, and it worked really well for a few months. And after about 8 months, it just fizzled out. I think some women were going back to work, some women moved away, and I think somehow it morphed into something else. But I mean, to be able to try stuff, you know, maybe it'll work for a while, maybe it won't, but we never know till we try, until we experiment, and not to take that failure personally. So when my Desperate Housewives wasn't, you know, turning into amazing things a year later, I could choose, am I going to get dismayed and discouraged and, God, you told me to do this and it hasn't worked how I wanted it to? No, I tried it. It was fun. We had fun doing it. But whatever.
Yeah, and that's a great example, babe. So it's having the freedom to fail. And so sometimes churches have a habit of, you know, like we shoot the wounded, we treat them like horses have gone a bit lame. Whereas actually we need to, actually. So one of the things we'll talk about a lot is stories and telling stories. And I think there's a beauty about telling stories of failure as well as stories of success, because someone tries to say, someone says, hey, I invited my neighbours round and I sent an invitation to the whole street, but only 2 people showed up. And they're going to, you're going to feel discouraged at the moment. But I think the testament at that point is like, okay, so what are you doing now? And they go, well, next time we are going to try again. Next time we worked out, perhaps we need to invite them this way, in a different sort of way, or the party needs to look like this, a bit differently. And for me, that then becomes a picture of the gospel, because it's, you try something, you mess up, you listen to the Lord, you know, there's the repent part of it, but God gives us fresh grace to get back into the action again, and you try again. So I think I just want to encourage you just to try stuff and to have a culture where it's like, it's fine.
Yeah.
You know, as long as we learn, we keep moving forward. As long as it's not ridiculously stupid thing to do, but you know what I mean? Don't be immoral, don't rob a bank or something. But beyond that, there's an awful lot of freedom where you can just try some stuff. And I think to us, you just got to try things. We try things all the time in our neighborhood. And
some are amazing. We did a scavenger hunt on Easter Day. No, not Easter Day, but Easter weekend. You know, because lockdown had pretty much just started. And so we did a scavenger hunt just on the street. We gave people a sheet of paper and they had to go and find how many teddy bears in the windows and which house got a red front door and stuff. So they're walking but keeping distance and not going near anybody. And it was a raging success. It was really, really well.
And we gave out Easter eggs at the end and all that stuff, Candy.
But we've tried some other stuff where nobody's turned up.
Yeah.
So,
and things where surprising people show up. So you just got to try things. So you have freedom to fail. Anyone else want to say anything? Because I'm conscious we need to wrap up in a few minutes. Anyone else want to comment or ask a question? Or
Hi, I have a quick question. My name's Jennifer, by the way. And I love the concept, but one of the questions I have is I'm running into people in the church that are looking for discipleship themselves. So they are not feeling like they're getting discipled. So how does missional communities expect those that want discipleship to do discipleship, if that's what I'm hearing and understanding? So does that fill a role for them, or how does that work?
That's really good.
You start?
Okay, I'll start on it. That's a really good question, Jennifer. So I think what we have to do, and we'll do some stuff on this actually as we go along, is having a clear understanding of what we mean by disciple. So what we found is that most churches are not clear on that. So the way we would define a disciple is you go back to the New Testament word. The Greek word is mathetes, which means learner. So the essence of discipleship is learning from Jesus. So for us, the 2 great questions of discipleship are, number 1, what is Jesus saying? And number 2, how am I responding, or how are we responding? So discipleship is always about obedience. So it's what's Jesus saying and how am I obeying him? Am I putting it into practice? And that can apply to big things or tiny things. It could be, Lord, what should I do with my life? Or it could be, I'm getting really irritated with the kids leaving dirty plates and bowls out on the kitchen counter all the time. And there's a sense in which the Lord can coach us and disciple us in all those things. Obviously, that's just my family. None of you ever have that. but I think what you find is those questions become like a universal skeleton key that unlock all discipleship situations. So if that's the case, then what we have found is that discipleship actually happens more quickly and more radically when you're on mission. I think there's a myth that many Christians and many churches have, which is, and it goes something like, okay, we love the idea of being on mission, but I need to get sorted first, or we need to get our stuff together first before we can be on mission. To which I would challenge them to say, show me that in the Gospels, show me that in the Bible, because it's completely unbiblical.
So again,
I mean, it's utter nonsense, biblically speaking.
If you think of how Jesus did it, so Jesus took this bunch of 12. Were they even Christians when he first started doing stuff with them? You know, I mean, Judas eventually disowned him, but I mean, they didn't know what they were doing, and yet he would have private times with them when he would teach them and he'd model stuff to them, but then he would take them with him while he did all this outreach stuff. So they're doing the basics, but they're also doing the deeper stuff with him one-on-one. He's teaching them how to pray. So they're doing life together out on mission, plus in the smaller group setting with those people who he's wanted to invest in as well. And
they're being sent out as well without him on very early stages, like really irresponsibly early. Jesus sends them out, if you think about it. And so I think what I'd say to we absolutely, so what I'd say to your point is, absolutely we want to disciple people. We deeply believe in that. And I'm not saying don't do that, but I think what you will find is there's a sharpness and a clarity to the questions that people ask when they're also living as missionaries. And what it does is you disciple them into disciple makers rather than just being disciples. And I think our task is to make disciple-making disciples. So it doesn't just stop. And again, that's breaking the consumer pattern. So if it's just, hey, Jennifer, I want you to feed me. I want you to give me Bible knowledge and download it to me and disciple me, but I don't really have any intention of doing anything about it other than perhaps maybe being vaguely nicer to my wife. That's not really advancing the kingdom at a great deal. Whereas instead, if I'm on mission, if I'm like trying to work out how do I reach my soccer, the guys I play soccer with, and you're coaching me about that, and I'm running into something, I come back and go, wow, there's this thing this week, and what do I do? This guy said this, and I'm going to be really hungry and far more teachable in that environment. Does that help?
Yes, that helps. Thank you.
And there's structural things we can suggest to help facilitate all that. I'm not saying don't go deep, but yeah. Sorry, did someone else start speaking now? I don't know if I cut someone off.
Hi, Alex. This is Ted Fong.
Hi, Ted.
And nice to meet you. I just want to thank you for introducing this to us. And when Gary Louie mentioned that we had started this concept many years ago, it's amazing sometimes how long it takes to make change happen. But we're looking forward to this. And one of the comments that Roger made when we went into this whole COVID-19 shelter in place, that in times like this, there are opportunities for change. And one of the things he mentioned was that there's a chance to change the rhythm in life. So I think this aspect that we're looking at for missional communities is a great opportunity, and I'm looking forward to working with you guys and our congregation. So thank you.
Thank you. That's so lovely of you. Thank you. It's really gracious and kind.
Hey, I'm Matt. It's nice to meet you guys. I am just super excited to be able to meet you guys and hear from you and hear your experience with the missional communities and everything. I really resonate with that jewelry story, actually, that you shared. In my time in youth ministry, back when we had 2 services, we had noticed kind of this niche where all of the parents who served in the first service were going to the second service, and all their kids were running amok and they needed a place to go. And so we took all the students and young adults and organized some impromptu game nights. We kind of just had everyone play video games all over the youth room. It was a blast. And some weeks we would get 3 students, and some weeks we would get 25 students.
You've muted yourself in your excitement.
I've been muted by the host. Thanks. Yeah, no, I really resonated with that, and now I'm realizing that was an instance of missional communities, and so I'm really excited to explore more of that with FCC and try to build some momentum going forward. So thank you guys for being here.
Thank you, mate. That's really kind of you. Thank you. Okay, we want to give you a quick piece of homework because we talked about that. So here's what your homework is. So both of you who've got your videos on, and those of you naughty ones who never turned your video on because you're hiding because you think your hair looks a mess or something.
We like to see your faces.
We want to see faces. So all of you this applies to. Roger's got your names written down. He's going to be tracking you down one by one if you don't do this. So here's what your homework is. So this is thinking about hands. This is thinking about loving the lost. What we want you to do is we want you to pray for your neighbors.
Is it specifically neighbors?
So yeah, it could be. So obviously, hopefully by now you do know your geographic neighbors where you live. A number of them. I'm obviously not every single person, but it's going to be a number. It could be your workplace colleagues if that's the primary place of mission for you, or it could be school or whatever, at the gym, whatever it looks like for you. But I think identify where is that place of mission for you in this season, and I want you to be able to start praying for people by name. Okay, the reason we say by name is specific prayers get specific answers, and there is something about, the old Billy Graham thing where they get everyone advanced into prayer triplets and you all have 3 names you all pray for. There's something about that sort of specificity that really works and is more effective. So, who might be the 3 or who might be some more? We actually have a map in our kitchen we've drawn up of our kind of little neighborhood. And when we meet new people, we kind of draw the house on the map and we write their names down. That's how we remember. And over time, we build relationships, and where, you get to pray for get involved in their life. So pray for them by name. And a way of doing that kind of helps keep it interesting is doing some prayer walking. So we could give you some longer teaching on that, but the kind of in a nutshell, that's you go for a walk in your neighborhood, perhaps either by yourself or in pairs, and you're praying for what the Spirit brings to mind, what the Spirit's showing you. And you don't act weird. You look like you're normal. You look like you're having a normal conversation. If someone comes up to you, you talk to them. You don't be weird. But you can, as you go, you can pray for the people or the buildings or the businesses or whatever it is. You will know some of the stories of the people as you walk past their homes, and so that could be a great way to do praying for your neighbors as well. But so we want to start something that appears simple but actually is a foundational practice as a missionary, which is we must be a people of prayer. If we're not praying, we're not going to get much fruit. So we've got to be praying for our neighbors by name, or if it's your work colleagues, pray for them by name, wherever it is that you feel called to be on mission. Does that make sense? Is everyone good with that? Okay. So that's achievable for everyone, but you might need to put it on your calendar and there's a little alarm goes off every day at a certain time. You just stop and pray. Something like that is going to make it a discipline and a practice for you, or have a card stuck in your Bible. So when you have your quiet time, you do it, or whatever you need to do, a post-it note on your bathroom mirror, you'll work out what the best thing is to do. And with that, we're handing back to the studio. There's Roger.
Well, thank you, Alex and Hannah. What a great opening, a great first first session. I can't wait for the next 6. Also, we are Father's Day on what it means to be a church on mission, and so you'll be hearing more about that as we get ready. This Sunday, let me give you a hint as to what's coming up this Sunday. My good friend, Pastor Bernard Emerson from Oakland. Bernard with Pastor Kyle Brooks, the 2 of them planted a church together when Bernard had a predominantly African American church, Kyle had a predominantly white church, and they merged. And the church is called Tapestry, and they are doing unbelievable things in Oakland. Bernard also works with the leaders of the church, 30 leaders that he is discipling and working with in San Quentin. And you might think San Quentin has a church. They have a very robust church of about 400 people, and he leads the leaders there. And Bernard is going to be preaching this Sunday and talking about what is going on. It's very timely in terms of what's going on in our society and our culture right now. So you won't want to miss that. Won't want to miss next Tuesday. Again, Hannah and Alex, I'm so thrilled to have the two of you to be a part of what we're doing, because they aren't talking about theory about this. They have lived this, not only in England, but they have lived it here in the States in 3 different settings, and so they know that this is something that God does over and over and over again. I think the time is right, and we're certainly ready. Great turnout tonight, and so I'm going to ask Benji. Benji, you've been looking forward to this, so unmute yourself, say a couple of things, and then would you close us in prayer tonight?
Yeah, no, I mean, thank you, Alex and Hannah, so much for leading this and your sermon on Sunday as well. This is really exciting time to just be starting this journey together as a church, with you guys coaching us, and just watching to see how God's been preparing our church for this moment over the last many years as we shift, and then for all this to happen during this time. I think God's really calling the church to shift and change in how we do things and how to connect and be out in the community and, get a little messy. And so why don't we just pray? Let's go ahead and pray. Dear Lord, I just thank you so much for this time. I thank you for just the coaching that we've gotten tonight, Lord, and just the permission to fail, Lord, to try things, to do things we think will work, and then try things, learn from them and try other things that might work better, Lord. And I just thank you. Thank you for imagination. Thank you for dreams. I thank you just for this chance that we can be able to reach out to our communities, think of things in a new way. And Lord, I pray that through all of this, you'll be glorified and that people will be able to take one step closer to you through things that we're involved with and that you're working in their hearts, Lord. And thank you so much for this time. Thank you for Hannah and Alex, and I thank you for Roger as well. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks again, Alex. Thanks, Hannah.
Thank you.
Great.
See you all next week.
We'll see you guys next Tuesday at 7.
Next Tuesday. Good stuff.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.